So let's talk about limits. We like to be able to talk about anything we want, and we can. We have the words to explain everything. That's just what language is good at. But just because we can express ourselves doesn't mean that we should. There are a lot of topics we've learned to be careful of, and words we should avoid. So just a warning, we're using a lot of them today. So if you're not in the mood for some swearing across a lot of different languages, this might not be the best episode for you. But for the rest of you, I'm O.T. Lieberman, and this is the Ling Space.
Welcome to the Ling Space.
So like I said, in this episode we're going to be both saying and showing a number of explicit swear words in English and other languages. If that's not something you feel comfortable with, we'll have a clean summary of the linguistics behind it on our Tumblr, so check out the link in the description below. But you should probably stop watching now. Okay, so no matter what culture you look at, there's always some standards for how to behave as a proper person. Ways of talking with people to show you respect both them and the society overall. And when it comes to language, that means using some words and constructions and keeping clear of others. We'll be talking more about the positive side of politeness in the future, but for today, we're looking at taboos. Taboos in language are topics and words that lie at the extreme low end of the politeness spectrum. Slinging these terms around can make people feel embarrassed or ashamed, and so if you're being polite, you keep them well away from your mouth. Sometimes these taboo words are just globally bad, never to be used. But often the words are only supposed to be said by certain people or in certain circumstances and never otherwise. Like, in Hebrew, the true name of God was only supposed to be said by priests when they were blessing people in the temple. Any other time or place, they weren't supposed to use it, and non-priests were never supposed to use it at all. But outside of Judaic culture, that prohibition doesn't necessarily hold. And in fact, that's the way it is with taboos overall. Even if every human culture has taboos, they're not always the same ones. It's not like any of these things are actually bad. They're all important to be able to talk about. A word that's terrible in one place can be fine in another. So if the Jews felt weird about saying the name of God, the Romans sure felt fine about naming theirs out loud. But across cultures, we tend to find the same themes cropping up as linguistic taboos. Mainly body parts and bodily functions like sex, excretion, or death, and people are things that require respectful treatment, like family terms, religion, race, and politics. Within these categories, though, you can find variation. Like, look at religious terms. In some cultures, like we've seen, you don't want to name any deities, and it can be like that in English, too. Many people want to avoid saying Jesus, for example. But you can have it extend to other parts of religion, too. Say, like, in Quebec French, some of the most taboo words are items used in Catholic religious service, like tabarnak for tabernacle or coalice for chalice. Or it can extend to people related to religion as well, like how in Japan, one of the worst things you can call a woman is ama, or nun. It's really bad. Unless it's within the religious context itself. No one is going to feel weird about you saying Jesus or Charis if you're in a church to pray. The intent behind it really matters. In other cases, simply calling people directly by name can be really impolite. Languages like Javanese or Japanese use systems of honorifics to show respect for people. Dropping them entirely is very familiar and can be really rude. But if you want taboos on names themselves, take a look at Bariai, a language spoken in Papua New Guinea. Here, using the names of your spouse's parents is considered taboo. But in Bariai, people are often named after objects or animals, and that gives you some problems if you want to talk about anything that matches your in-laws' names. So like, say your father-in-law's name Puaya, or crocodile, and you want to talk about a crocodile you've seen. You can't just use the word, that's off limits because it's his name. So instead, you'd say bagale, which is a borrowed word for crocodile from a nearby language, which might be inconvenient, but at least you're not breaking any taboos. Of course, cross-linguistic influences on taboos don't end with word switching. Often words in one language will accidentally sound like taboo words in another language. Look at Thai in English. If you're Thai and you know English, and you're talking in Thai near English speakers, you might avoid words like fuck or prick, even though those just mean sheath or chili pepper in Thai. And you might find it even harder to use otherwise innocuous English words like yet or ki, because they sound a lot like the Thai words yet and ki, which basically mean fuck and shit. Even if they're not bad in English, they're still uncomfortable to say. The taboo power is strong. And we really mean it, it's strong. The power of taboos can go really deep into our psyches, and we can show this using the Stroop test. So here's the basics of the test. You show people a series of words in different colors, and you ask them to just name the color the word is printed in. So you don't actually need to read the word. You just say the color the word is in. So try it here. Let's put up some words, and all you need to do is tell me what color you're seeing. All right? Not bad, yeah? But let's see what happens now. Much harder, right? So this is usually used to show just how automatic reading is. The presence of a different color word interferes with you saying what the color you're seeing is. You can't help reading, and that gets you confused, so you slow down. So what does that have to do with taboo words? Well, a psycholinguist wanted to look at something similar. So let's try the test again. Remember, all you need to do is say the color. So these aren't color words, but it isn't hard, right? How about with these? Way worse, right? Our minds can't help but read those words and process them, and then we get shocked. We get forced into having these reactions, and they slow us down from our task. Because they're so strong, when we learn a new language, we often want to learn these words first, either because they're fun or to avoid insulting people. We know they're bad, and so we're interested in them. But even if bad words are bad, sometimes we still need to talk about all this stuff, right? So how can we do that? Well, one option that's got a lot of history behind it is euphemisms. A euphemism is a way to make use of indirect or prettier language to make a taboo or unpleasant topic easier to handle. And we have a whole bunch of linguistic approaches to this too. One method is to just straight up change the word. Like, we can just clip off part at the end, so instead of, say, Jesus, we get G's. Or we can abbreviate things, so we can get POS for piece of shit, or the F word instead of fuck. Or we can just mispronounce things and swap in a different but similar sounding word. Sometimes, like gosh instead of God, or tabarnouche instead of tabarnak, it gives you something new. But other times they match other words in the language, like shoot instead of shit, or fudge or fluff instead of fuck. So with these, the context tells you which it is. Oh, fudge is probably the euphemism. I made you some delicious maple fudge is actual fudge. We can also bring in other vocabulary that's more accurate than a weird substitution. Like, you can use a medical term, like sexual intercourse, or gluteus maximus instead of butt. Or you can just use a pronoun and rely on people to know what you mean. Like, if I say Miles and Lara are doing it, you probably know what that it is. Or in Japanese, if you say kare no asoko or his there, what's meant by there is pretty obvious. Another option is to use figures of speech instead. So let's look at the ones around death. We don't like talking about death much, and you seem blunt if you're just like, Grandpa died. So instead, we use understatements like we put our cat to sleep, or metaphors like we lost her to a car accident, or we try being ambiguous like she's gone to the other side. These all feel better and nicer than the straight up dead option. Of course, the thing about euphemisms is that once they get associated with something bad, it's not really okay to use that euphemism anymore either. This is known as the euphemism treadmill. Like, let's look at personal hygiene. We don't like talking about where we go to relieve ourselves, so that place cycles through names. Water closet turns to toilet, and then to bathroom, and then to restroom, because no matter what word you use, the shine eventually comes off it if you relate it to pooping. And that's just one of our taboo topics. Across languages, there are lots of things that we don't feel like we can say. And these taboos evolve over time, as we'll talk about back on our website. But don't worry, now that we've talked about it here today, in the future, we'll stay within our polite limits. So we've reached the end of the Ling space for this week. If you weren't thrown off by the colorful language, you learned that all languages have taboo words, even if the actual taboos differ from place to place. That there are themes that we can find in the kinds of words that get ruled out. And that to get around these restrictions, we use euphemisms even if we need to change them up over time. The Ling Space is produced by me, Moti Lieberman. It's directed by Delélise Prévost, and it's written by both of us. Our editor is Georges Coulot, our production assistant is Stéphane Hurtubise, our music is by Shane Turner, and our graphics team is Atelier Muse. We're down in the comments below, or you can bring the discussion back over to our website where we have some extra material on this topic. Check us out on Tumblr, Twitter, and Facebook, and check out our store. We've got mugs, posters, and t-shirts. And if you want to keep expanding your own personal Ling space, please subscribe. And we'll see you next Wednesday. À plus tard!